Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. My death wasn't flashing before my eyes. It was hurtling toward my face in the form of a scarred, calloused fist. The air in the derelict equipment room smelled of rust, old sweat, and the terrifyingly expensive cologne of the boy about to rearrange my bone structure. You think you're clever, scholarship trash? Kalen Vance growled, his voice a low tremor of thunder that vibrated through the floorboards. He had me pinned against the cold, peeling paint of the wall, his left forearm crushing my windpipe just enough to make the world spark with white spots. His right hand was drawn back, a loaded gun of muscle and rage. I had 3 seconds. In the first second, I analyzed my options. Fighting back was suicide. Kalen was 6'3" of underground fighting champion and unchecked aggression. Begging only excited him. I'd seen him break a senior's arm for pleading. Screaming was useless. The heavy rain battering the roof drowned out everything. In the second, I looked into his eyes. They weren't just angry, they were frantic. Dilated pupils, the twitch of a jaw clenching against something darker than just a stolen seat in the cafeteria. He wanted to hit something because he was in pain. He needed a release. He needed a shock to the system so profound it would derail the train of violence careening off the tracks. In the third second, as the fist began its forward trajectory, I didn't flinch. I surged upward. I grabbed the lapels of his soaking wet blazer, pulled myself up on my toes, and smashed my lips against his. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was a collision. A desperate, tactical nuke deployed at point-blank range. The fist stopped. It hovered inches from my temple, the wind of its motion actually ruffling my hair. Kalen froze. His entire body, a rigid statue of violence, locked up. The crushing pressure on my throat vanished as his hand went slack from sheer cognitive dissonance. I didn't pull away. I doubled down. I pressed closer, parting my lips slightly, tasting the copper of a split lip he must have gotten earlier that day and the mint of his breath. I made a sound, a soft, whimpering exhaling that vibrated against his mouth. For a heartbeat, a long, terrifying eternity, Kalen Vance, the tyrant of St. Jude's Academy, the heir to the Vance Syndicate, did nothing. Then he shoved me. I hit the floor hard, sliding back against a stack of gym mats. I gasped for air, wiping my mouth, staring up at him. Kalen was touching his lips. His face, usually a mask of stoic fury, was twisted in profound confusion. A flush, dark and angry, crept up his neck, clashing with the pale scar running down his cheek. What? His voice cracked. He sounded less like a monster and more like a boy who had just seen a ghost. What the hell was that? Survival. I rasped out, my voice hoarse. I scrambled to my feet, keeping the mats between us. You were going to break my jaw? I had to short-circuit your brain. You kissed me. And you didn't hit me. I countered, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. So it worked. Kalen stared at his hand, the fist that had failed to launch. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in the 3 years we had attended this hellhole of a school. He didn't see Julian the ghost, Julian the scholarship charity case. He saw the only person crazy enough to invade his personal space and live. He took a step forward. I flinched. He stopped, his eyes narrowing. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating curiosity that was infinitely more dangerous. You think you're smart, Julian, he murmured. It was the first time he'd ever used my name. You think you can manipulate me with that? I think I'd prefer being kissed to being beaten into a coma, I said, trying to steady my trembling legs. Wouldn't you? The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the window panes. Kalen lowered his hand. He adjusted his blazer, smoothing out where I had grabbed him. Get out. I blinked. What? Get out before I remember that I enjoy breaking things, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And Julian? I paused at the door, hand on the rusted handle. If you ever tell anyone about this, he said, turning his back to me, I won't use my fists next time. I'll ruin you. I fled into the rain, my lips still burning, unaware that I hadn't just saved my life. I had signed a contract with the devil, and he was about to come to collect. The week that followed was a study in psychological warfare. St. Jude's academy was a Shark Tank wrapped in ivy and Gothic architecture. The sons of politicians, CEOs, and warlords roamed these halls. Hierarchy was everything. And Kaylin Vance was the apex predator. Usually, when Kaylin targeted someone, they vanished. Transferred. Hospitalized. But I was still there. Every time I entered a room, the temperature seemed to drop. I felt his eyes on me. In the library, I'd look up from my calculus textbook to see him watching me through the gaps in the shelves, his gaze intense and unreadable. In the cafeteria, the sea of students would part for him, and he would stop at my table, looming over me for a terrifying second before walking away without a word. The psychological toll was worse than the physical beating would have been. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was waiting for retribution. It came on a Friday, during the torrential downpour that seemed to plague the city that month. I was leaving the chemistry lab late. The corridors were empty, the shadows stretching long and distorted across the marble floors. I turned the corner toward the exit and slammed into a wall of muscle. "Watch it," a voice sneered. It wasn't Kaylin. It was Jax, Kaylin's lieutenant. A cruel, wiry boy who enjoyed pain a little too much. Flanking him were two other members of Kaylin's inner circle. "Look who it is," Jax grinned, cracking his knuckles. "The little scholarship rat. Kaylin's been acting weird all week, and rumor has it, you're the reason." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, backing up. My back hit the lockers. "I think you do." Jack stepped closer. "Did you beg him? Did you cry?" "Whatever you did, it made him soft. And we don't like soft." He drew a switchblade. The silver metal glinted under the fluorescent lights. "Kaylin said to leave him alone." One of the other boys muttered nervously. "Kaylin isn't here," Jax hissed. "And what the boss doesn't know won't hurt him. But it's definitely going to hurt you." He lunged. I squeezed my eyes shut, raising my arms to protect my face. Crack. The sound of bone hitting bone echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. I didn't feel the knife. I opened my eyes. Jax was on the floor, sliding 10 feet away, clutching a nose that was pouring blood. Standing in front of me was Kaylin Vance. He was breathing hard, his blazer discarded on the floor, his white shirt clinging to his chest with sweat and rain. He looked like a vengeful god carved from marble and fury. "I thought I gave an order," Kaylin said, his voice terrifyingly calm. The two lackeys backed away, hands raised. "Jax," Jax said. "I don't care what Jax said." Kaylin walked over to the boy groaning on the floor. He placed a heavy boot on Jax's chest. "Julian is off limits. If anyone touches him, they answer to me. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Kai?" "Yes." Jax wheezed. "Scram." They scrambled away like cockroaches exposed to light, dragging Jax with them. Silence descended on the hallway again. I slid down the locker, my legs finally giving out. Kaylin turned to me. The rage in his eyes dimmed, replaced by that same exhaustion I had seen in the equipment room. He looked at me, then at the knife Jax had dropped. "You have a death wish," he muttered, reaching down. I flinched again. He froze. A flicker of something like hurt passed through his eyes, gone so fast I almost missed it. "I'm not going to hit you, Julian." He extended a hand. I hesitated. Then, trembling, I took it. He pulled me up with effortless strength. But instead of letting go, he kept his grip on my hand, pulling me a step closer. The air between us crackled, charged with static electricity. "Why?" I whispered. "Why did you help me?" Kaylin looked down at me, his dark eyes scanning my face, lingering on my mouth. "Because you owe me." I owe you." "You kissed me," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "You took something from me without permission. Now, you belong to me until I decide otherwise." "That's insane," I breathed. "You can't own a person. In this world, Julian? You can own anything if you have enough power." He leaned in, his lips brushing against the shell of my ear. "And right now, you are the only thing in this miserable school that doesn't bore me to death." He pulled back, his expression hardening. "Come with me." "Where?" "To my dorm." "I'm bleeding." I looked down. His right hand, the one he had used to strike Jax, was split open at the knuckles. Blood was dripping onto the pristine floor. "You need a nurse," I said. "I don't trust the nurses. They report to my father." He looked at me expectantly. "You're on scholarship. You work part-time at the clinic to keep your credits up. I've seen you wrapping ankles. You've been watching me." "I watch everything," he said simply. "Are you coming, or do I carry you?" Kaylin's dorm room wasn't a room. It was a penthouse suite. Leather furniture, mahogany bookshelves, and a view of the city skyline that probably cost more than my parents' house. But it was cold. Impersonal. There were no photos, no personal clutter. Just a bottle of whiskey on the table and a first aid kit he had tossed onto the sofa. He sat on the edge of the bed, stripping off his ruined shirt. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible. His torso was a tapestry of scars, some old and faded, others fresh and angry. Cigarette burns, knife slashes, the mottled bruising of blunt force trauma. It wasn't the body of a bully. It was the body of a soldier who had been fighting a war since childhood. I sat beside him, opening the kit. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. "This is going to sting," I murmured, dabbing alcohol onto his knuckles. He didn't even blink. He just watched me. His gaze was heavy, physical. It felt like a touch. "Who did this to you?" I asked quietly, gesturing to a long, jagged scar on his ribs. "My father," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. "A lesson in loyalty when I was 12. My hand faltered. I looked up at him. "Kaylin, don't," he warned, his eyes narrowing. "I don't need your pity, Julian. I need your hands to stop shaking so you can bandage me up." "It's not pity," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It's basic human decency. Something you seem to have forgotten exists." He let out a harsh laugh. "Decency gets you killed in my family. And what does cruelty get you?" I challenged, wrapping the gauze around his hand. A room full of expensive furniture and no one to trust. Kaylin went still. He reached out with his uninjured hand, gripping my chin. His fingers were rough, but his hold wasn't painful. He tilted my head up, forcing me to meet his gaze. "You have a sharp tongue for someone so small," he murmured. "One day, someone is going to cut it out." "Maybe," I whispered, my heart racing. "But until then, I'm going to use it." His eyes dropped to my lips. The atmosphere shifted again, thickening with that same undeniable tension from the equipment room. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. "Do it again," he commanded softly. "What?" "Kiss me." I froze. "Kaylin, you did it to survive before," he said, his thumb brushing over my lower lip. "Do it now because you want to." "I never said I wanted to." "You didn't have to." "I felt your heart racing against my chest, Julian." "I heard that sound you made." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. "You're just as messed up as I am. You crave the danger." He was right. God help me, he was right. I was terrified of him, but I was also drawn to him like a moth to a bug zapper. I saw the loneliness beneath the violence, the boy trapped inside the monster. And I had a savior complex the size of the Empire State Building. I closed my eyes and leaned in. This time, the kiss wasn't a collision. It was slow, tentative. Kaylin let out a low groan, his hand sliding from my chin to the back of my neck, tangling in my hair. He pulled me closer, his mouth devouring mine with a hunger that was overwhelming. He tasted of whiskey and danger. I climbed into his lap, straddling him, forgetting about the hierarchy, the fear, the scars. For a moment, we were just two broken boys trying to fix each other in the dark. When we finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, Kaylin rested his forehead against my shoulder. "You're mine now," he whispered into my shirt. "If the world tries to touch you, I'll burn it down." It sounded like a threat, but as I felt his arms wrap around my waist, holding on to me like I was the only solid thing in a spinning universe, I realized it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Of course, the universe loves to test promises. 2 weeks later, the test came. The Vance Syndicate was in a turf war with the Russo family. Tensions were high, spilling over into the school. I knew Kaylin was stressed. He was barely sleeping, constantly checking his phone, his temper on a hair trigger. I was walking to the library when a blackfin screeched to a halt beside me. Before I could react, a bag was thrown over my head, and I was dragged inside. I woke up in a warehouse, tied to a chair. Standing in front of me was a man I didn't recognize, flanked by 2 armed guards. "So," the man sneered, toying with a lighter. "This is Kaylin Vance's weakness. A scholarship student. How disappointment. I'm nobody." I stammered, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "That's not what the little birds tell me. They say the wolf of St. Jude's has been tamed. That he walks you to class. That he eats with you." The man leaned in. "We're going to send him a message. And you are the paper we're going to write it on." He raised the lighter. Bang. The metal door of the warehouse exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris, a figure emerged. Kalen. He wasn't wearing his school uniform. He was wearing tactical gear, a black assault rifle in his hands. And he wasn't alone. Behind him were a dozen men, his father's men. But Kalen was leading them. "Let him go," Kalen said. His voice wasn't a growl. It was ice. Absolute zero. "Vance." The Russo captain laughed nervously, holding the lighter closer to me. "One step closer, and the boy burns." "You misunderstand the situation," Kalen said, walking forward. He dropped the rifle. He pulled out a combat knife. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to butcher." What followed was a blur of violence that I wished I could forget. Kalen moved like a demon. He was fast, brutal, and efficient. He tore through the guards like they were made of paper. When he reached the captain, he didn't kill him immediately. He pinned him to the ground, the knife at his throat. "I told the world," Kalen whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "I told everyone that he was mine. Did you think I was joking?" "Please," the man gurgled. Kalen silenced him. Permanently. He stood up, covered in blood that wasn't his. He turned to me. The monster was fully unleashed. His eyes were wild, his chest heaving. I should have been terrified. I should have screamed. But all I saw was the boy who had held me in his dorm room. "Kai," I said softly. He flinched. He looked at his bloody hands, then at me. He took a step back. "Don't look at me," he rasped. "Don't look at what I am. Untie me, Kai. I'm a monster, Julian. Look at this. This is all I know. Untie me." He hesitated, then slashed the ropes binding my hands with a surgical precision that didn't nick my skin. As soon as my hands were free, I didn't run away. I reached out and grabbed his face. I didn't care about the blood. I smeared it across my own cheeks as I pulled him down. "You're a monster," I agreed, looking him dead in the eye. "But you're my monster." And I kissed him. Right there in the warehouse, surrounded by carnage and smoke. I kissed him to ground him. I kissed him to bring him back from the edge. Kalen crumbled. The adrenaline left him, and he sank to his knees, burying his face in my stomach, his arms wrapping around my legs. He shook, silent sobs racking his body. "I thought I lost you," he choked out. "You can't lose me," I said, running my fingers through his blood-matted hair. "You're stuck with me, remember? You own me." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and fierce. "No," he said, his voice firm. "No, Julian. I don't own you." He stood up, towering over me. But this time, the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't the bully anymore. He was the protector. And I wasn't the victim. I was the anchor. "We own each other," he corrected. He lifted me into his arms, carrying me out of the warehouse, stepping over the wreckage of his enemies. "Let's go home," he said. "To the dorm?" "No," he said, looking at the city skyline. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one can touch us." As we walked into the night, the rain finally stopped. The air was clear. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Because the darkest thing in the city was holding me, and he loved me. And that is how the gentle scholar tamed the rabid wolf of St. Jude's. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control of the beast, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you be able to love someone who had blood on their hands if it was shed to protect you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.